Imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet room late at night. The only sound is the hum of a distant street lamp and the ticking of a wall clock you've never noticed until now. The room is warm, familiar, safe. Yet something in your chest twists, a sensation like standing too close to the edge of a cliff and wondering what it would feel like to fall. On the desk before you is a photograph. It's you, but not the you that stares back in mirrors each morning. This version of you is screaming, rage boiling in your eyes, fists clenched, and a stranger cowering before you, the moment frozen forever on glossy paper. You don't remember when this was taken, or maybe you do, but your mind, ever protective, has locked it away behind thick mental walls. You were always a good person, weren't you? You held doors open for strangers. You apologized when you were wrong. You donated when you could. You listened when people cried, and yet something happened. Something snapped. What could possibly cause a good person to become something else entirely? Not overnight, but slowly, silently, like rust under the surface of clean steel, like a smile hiding a scream. We tell ourselves that monsters are born from cruelty, from trauma, from the other. They live out there, far away, beyond the fence of normal life. But what if that isn't true? What if monsters aren't born at all? What if they are grown like tumors in the soul, fertilized by silence, by self-deception, by the subtle corrosion of small compromises? Have you ever caught yourself enjoying someone else's failure a little too much? Have you ever felt a flicker of thrill in the thought of revenge? Or stood in the aftermath of something you said, something sharp and uncharacteristic, and thought, who was that? And if you could be that person once, could you become them again? What if the difference between you and the monsters you fear isn't goodness but opportunity? What if your morality is more fragile than you believe, hanging by threads of circumstance, mood, and memory? Think of the parent who once vowed never to hit their child, but loses control in a single moment of rage. The soldier who believed in peace until he was given a rifle. The politician who promised justice but ended up silencing the truth. The friend who betrayed you and swore they never meant to. Weren't they all good people once? So where does it begin, the unraveling? Is it in the first lie you tell yourself to justify a selfish act? Is it in the silence when you should speak up? Or perhaps it begins even earlier, in the stories we tell children about how good always triumphs over evil, never admitting that the two often wear the same face. You were told that villains are obvious, that monsters snarl and heroes shine. But real life doesn't come with orchestral warnings. Evil doesn't always announce itself with a mask and a motive. Sometimes it smiles, sometimes it cries, sometimes it believes it's doing the right thing. What if that's the most terrifying truth of all? That no one becomes a monster. They simply stop noticing that they already are one. Can a person love deeply, laugh honestly, and still be capable of cruelty? Can someone save a life in one moment and ruin another the next? And more importantly, what would you do if you found yourself slowly turning into what you once swore to fight? Would you stop it in time? Would you even see it? Or would the transformation be so gradual, so hidden behind good intentions and half-truths, that you'd still believe yourself righteous long after you've begun to rot from within? The question isn't why monsters exist. The question is how many of them were once like you, and if that's true, then what is it exactly that turns a good person into something else? Is it the world? Is it pain? Is it power, or is it simply the quiet accumulation of unnoticed choices, until one day you wake up and can remember the sound of your own conscience? As you stare at the photo again, ask yourself not who you were or even who you are, but who you might yet become. Because what lies ahead isn't just a philosophical question or a cautionary tale. It's a mirror. And now that you've looked into it, we need to talk about what's staring back. There's a terrifying elegance to human descent. It doesn't begin with a scream, but with a whisper, a rationalization, a single thought, seemingly harmless. I deserve this, or they don't understand, or worse still, this is the only way. To understand how good people become monsters, you must first understand something far more dangerous than hatred, something far more seductive than violence, the belief that we are good. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." He wasn't talking about accepting our dreams or our potential. He meant accepting the shadow, the part of the psyche we hide not only from others, but from ourselves. The dark twin who laughs at pain, who envies the cruel, who fantasizes about power, the one who would burn everything down just to feel warmth. Jung called it the shadow self, and warned that the more we deny it, the more power it gains over us. We tell ourselves, "I would never." But the unconscious doesn't care about declarations. It cares about integration. It watches from the corners of your soul, gaining strength every time you push it away. The paradox is brutal. Those who believe themselves purely good are often the most blind to their capacity for harm. You see, the issue is not that we have darkness inside us. The issue is that we pretend we don't. And in that pretense, we make ourselves vulnerable to it. Friedrich Nietzsche took this even further. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into the abyss gazes also into you. We've misunderstood this quote for generations. It is not merely a warning to those who battle evil. It is a revelation that in confronting evil, in touching it, even to destroy it, we risk becoming it. Because we are not separate from the abyss, we are the abyss, until we learn to recognize its voice inside us. But society doesn't teach this. It teaches repression. It teaches us to curate our identities like storefronts, to be palatable, to be good, and in doing so, it drives the shadow underground, where it festers, where it waits. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, believed that man is condemned to be free, that we must forge meaning in a world that offers none by default. But when we refuse to take responsibility for that freedom, when we blame the world, fate, or others, we rot from the inside. We become cowards hiding behind virtue. Now ask yourself, what happens to a person who has been told their entire life that they're good, only to suffer injustice, betrayal, or helplessness? What happens when that person begins to feel rage, but believes rage is wrong? When they feel envy, but call it ambition? When they manipulate, but call it strategic thinking? They do what most of us do. They compartmentalize, they fracture. They become two selves, the public self and the hidden one, the curated version of the self and the feral, unspoken truth. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that at our core, we are driven by will, a blind, irrational force that wants what it wants, regardless of logic or morality. This will isn't interested in goodness. It's interested in survival, in dominance, in control, And when suppressed long enough, it doesn't disappear. It mutates. Over time, that suppressed will, the rage, the shame, the hunger for recognition or vengeance, begins to wear a mask. It starts to look like righteousness, justice, even love, until the person wielding it believes they are still on the side of light. Even as their hands grow red, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but they never tell you why, because good intentions are fragile. They can be twisted, repurposed, co-opted by the very impulses they were meant to restrain. You think you're defending someone when really you're punishing them for not choosing you. You think you're being honest when really you're lashing out. You think you're protecting truth, but really you're silencing anything that threatens your ego. The real horror is not in what you do. It's in what you believe justifies it. This is how good people fall, not by abandoning their morals, but by warping them to serve their pain. You don't wake up a monster. You wake up exhausted. You wake up disappointed. You wake up with too many bruises on your conscience and too few answers. And one day you say, why should I be the one to keep suffering? Why should I keep playing fair? You cross a line, just one. Then another, each time with a reason, each time with a narrative, each time with a version of yourself whispering, it's not you, it's them, you're still good. By the time you realize the truth, your reflection no longer flinches. It stares back with calm detachment. The shadow no longer hides. It wears your face. And the worst part, you're not horrified. You're relieved. Because for the first time, you feel powerful, free, untouched by the constant need to be good in a world that rewards the ruthless. But the price of that freedom is subtle and slow, a coldness in the heart, a stillness in the soul, a disconnection that no amount of applause or control can fix. Viktor Frankl wrote that when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. But what if the self we change into is not a better version, but a colder one, harder one? What if adaptation isn't growth, but corrosion disguised as evolution? This is the hidden problem. We are all unfinished. We are all dual-natured. And if we refuse to reconcile with our inner contradictions, the darkness we suppress will find its way out. Not with a roar, but with a smile. We become monsters not by embracing evil, but by denying we ever could. And still the descent continues, because knowing this truth isn't enough. Something else must be confronted, something even more disturbing. What happens to the world around us when we don't catch ourselves in time? You think you'll notice it the moment you step over the line, the exact second where good becomes gray and gray turns black. But it doesn't happen like that. There is no thunderclap, no switch flipped, no voice that whispers, now you've gone too far. Instead, the change creeps. It shifts things around you before it shifts you. It begins in your relationships. People stop looking you in the eye the same way. Their laughter comes with hesitation. They walk on eggshells, unsure of where the edges are now, because you've blurred them. You've become unpredictable, but not in the thrilling way, in the way that feels like a loaded gun left on the kitchen table. You still think you're doing the right thing. That's what makes it so devastating, because now your darkness is functioning. It's working. You're getting results. You've stopped being walked on. People listen when you speak. They flinch when you raise your voice. You no longer bend over backward to be understood, because now they adjust to you. And so, you keep going. This is the beginning of the unseen consequences. They don't announce themselves. They emerge quietly, dressed in the rewards of control, masked in the benefits of power. But beneath the surface, they leave damage you don't register until it's irreversible. One day, someone close to you stops confiding in you. Another day, a colleague avoids you even when you're right. Later still, you realize no one tells you the full truth anymore. They edit themselves, shape themselves, trying not to provoke you. You think they've changed, that they've become weak. But the truth is colder. You've become unsafe. And this isn't just interpersonal. The consequences extend far beyond your circle. Because monsters, when they are unaware, build systems. They raise children. They lead companies. They teach. They judge. And their shadows embed themselves into everything they touch. Darkness institutionalizes. This is how cruelty becomes normalized, not through tyrants pounding fists, but through everyday people who let their fears and disappointments calcify into ideology, into rules, into hierarchies designed not to protect truth, but to shield the ego from ever feeling vulnerable again. Cognitive biases aid this decay. The self-serving bias tells you every mistake you make was circumstantial, but every mistake others make reveals something essential about their character. The confirmation bias ensures you only see what supports your narrative, that you are good and they are not. The just world hypothesis whispers that people deserve their suffering, so you don't have to feel guilty when you cause it. Your brain is wired not for truth, but for survival. And if that survival requires illusion, it will build an entire identity out of delusion and defend it to death. And society, it rewards this. It's built on personas, on impressions. It doesn't care if you are good, only if you appear so. Social media is a theater of moral grandstanding. Righteous outrage is currency. Control over others is celebrated, disguised as leadership. Emotional detachment is reframed as strength. And slowly, the monstrous becomes aesthetic, marketable. Look closely and you'll see the machinery. Behind every polished face, every moralistic slogan, there are incentives. And those incentives often reward those who have given up the struggle to stay human, not the truly compassionate, but the tactically agreeable, not the wise, but the loud, not the loving, but the useful. And yet, the real danger isn't even in what this does to others. It's in what it does to you. There comes a moment where you stop remembering what it felt like to be innocent. When your empathy no longer activates in the same way. When you hear someone cry, and a part of you assesses the utility of that emotion before offering comfort. There comes a moment where you stop remembering what it felt like to be innocent. When your empathy no longer activates in the same way. When you hear someone cry, and a part of you assesses the utility of that emotion before offering comfort. You start to distrust softness, even in yourself. You tell yourself kindness is weakness. You view vulnerability as a liability. You begin to optimize your soul like a machine, every thought filtered through the lens of gain. And yet, in rare, quiet moments when you are alone with your reflection, there's a flicker of something old. A voice from before the fall. It says, "This isn't you," but you push it down. Because listening would mean unraveling everything. Admitting that somewhere along the way you became what you once pitied, or worse, what you once feared. And still, it goes deeper. There are children watching you now. Maybe your own, maybe someone else's. They see not who you claim to be, but who you are when no one's applauding. And they're learning. They're absorbing the logic of your shadow. Power is what protects. Empathy is optional. Conscience is negotiable. and thus the cycle repeats. But here's the most insidious part. Monsters rarely think of themselves as such. They see themselves as survivors, as realists, as necessary correctives to a world that wronged them. Their cruelty is always couched in justification. If I don't do this, someone worse will. Or this is the price of leadership. Or the world made me this way. And the world listens. It always does. Because it doesn't want to face the truth either. The truth that evil is not a distant force, but a cumulative effect. That it begins in small ways. A child whose pain was ignored. A teenager whose kindness was mocked. An adult who gave everything and got nothing back. Each moment carving a hollow in the heart. And into that hollow flows rage. Not the loud, cinematic rage, but the quiet kind. The cold kind. The kind that smiles while breaking things. And you, reading this, know it too. You felt it. That moment when you realized you could hurt someone. That it wouldn't be hard. That it might even feel justified. That's not a defect. That's awareness. The problem is never that the monster appears. The problem is when we stop recognizing it as foreign. When we let it live in us like a tenant, rearranging the furniture, setting new rules, until one day we no longer remember who used to live there. You may think this is a warning, but it's not. It's a mirror. One most people will walk away from because it's easier to keep performing goodness than to confront the part of you that could end it all with a single choice. But those who stay, those who dare to stare back and not flinch, may begin to understand something vital. That facing the monster isn't the end. It's the beginning of the rebellion. It doesn't begin with forgiveness. It doesn't begin with love. It begins with rage. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that refuses to be ruled anymore. A deep, slow-burning fury. Not at others, not even at the world, but at your own surrender. At the moment you let fear sculpt your identity. At the slow decay of your integrity in exchange for validation, control, survival. And it whispers a single word. Enough. It is the rebellion. But it doesn't look like revolution. It looks like remembrance. The clawing back of something you buried beneath performance, beneath defensiveness, beneath the monstrous self you thought was keeping you safe. It starts not when you rise against others, but when you stop lying to yourself. You look in the mirror, and this time you don't turn away. You say, I see what I've become. I know what I've done, and I will not pass this sickness on. That is the first act of real courage, because escaping the monster requires something most people are terrified of. Radical honesty, not curated confession, not the kind of self-awareness that still protects your image, but the brutal, unvarnished truth that makes you sick to your stomach. That shows you how many justifications were just cowardice in disguise. How many moments of cruelty were really projections of your own unresolved wounds? How often your so-called strength was just control masquerading as leadership? The rebellion is psychological before it is behavioral. You must peel away the armor. You must allow yourself to feel the grief beneath the rage. Because yes, you were hurt. You were ignored. You were betrayed. You were made to believe that love is conditional, that weakness is fatal, that to be human is to be taken advantage of. But the monster you became to survive that pain, it will never lead you back to wholeness. And yet, breaking free doesn't mean swinging back into helplessness. It means stepping into power that does not corrupt, a kind of authority that is not built on fear, but on presence. This requires a new archetype. We've been told only two exist, the victim or the tyrant, the innocent or the beast. But there is a third, the integrated warrior. The one who knows his darkness but chooses not to weaponize it. The one who feels rage but lets it inform, not dominate his choices. The one who could destroy but instead rebuilds. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole by uniting all aspects of the psyche, especially the parts we reject. He warned that denying the shadow leads to possession, but integrating it, that leads to wisdom. You don't destroy your darkness, you learn its language. You sit with it until it stops screaming and starts speaking. You understand its origin, how it was born from protection, from heartbreak, from boundaries crossed and dignity denied. You thank it for its service. And then you take the wheel, not to drive away from the pain, but to drive through it. This is where the mind begins to shift. You no longer seek control to feel powerful. You seek understanding. You no longer need to dominate conversations. You learn to listen. You no longer perform strength. You embody it. And here something beautiful starts to happen. Compassion, not the soft, saccharine kind, but the kind forged in fire, the kind that says, I know what it's like to be twisted by pain, and I will not let that define me. The kind that recognizes the monster in others and chooses not to feed it. The kind that refuses to become the thing it hates, even when it has every reason to. This is the rebellion that terrifies the world, because you can't be manipulated anymore. Not by praise, not by threats, not by guilt. You've already seen the monster in yourself and walked away from it, and now you are dangerous again, but this time in the right direction. This time you're dangerous to the systems that rely on your silence, to the ideologies that depend on your disconnection, to the narratives that demand you choose between being a victim or an aggressor. You begin to lead differently. You raise children differently. You speak differently, not from a place of superiority, but from a place of earned presence, because you remember who you almost became, and you will never go back. But rebellion is not a one-time act. It is a practice. Every day the monster will try to whisper again, you're better than them. They deserve this. No one will know. And every day you answer it, not with suppression, but with awareness. You say, I hear you, but I choose differently now. And some days you will fail. You will fall back into old instincts. You will raise your voice in ways that feel too familiar. You will chase control instead of connection. But the difference now is that you will notice, you will return, you will repair. That's the rebellion too, because monsters do not apologize. Monsters do not soften. Monsters do not grow. But you chose to break the pattern, to feel again, to hurt again, to risk love again. And that is terrifying, because freedom always is. But here's the truth. The monster didn't protect you. It numbed you. It gave you the illusion of safety at the cost of your soul. The rebellion is not loud. It's not public. It is not cinematic. It is quiet, internal, lifelong. It is choosing moment by moment to be human again without flinching. And in doing so, you will find something you forgot existed. A kind of strength that doesn't need armor. A kind of power that doesn't need to harm. A kind of clarity that makes the old ways look pitiful. And when you meet others still lost in their monstrous selves, you won't judge. You'll remember, because you were them once. But you made a choice, and now, no, you are free, But even freedom has its price. You must never forget what it cost you to return to yourself. And that brings us to the final truth, the revelation that waits once all illusions have burned, the deepest secret of all. It hits you in a moment of unbearable stillness, not in the middle of a crisis, not during a profound conversation, but in a quiet moment when the noise stops, when there's nothing to control, fix, or explain. A single thought emerges: the monster was never real. And with it, the weight drops. You've been fighting a shadow, a story you inherited, a role you played, but the entity you feared becoming, the one you wore like armor, was never your essence. It was a distortion, a coping mechanism, a reflection of wounds, not of will. And in that realization, something cracks. Because you understand now, you were never the monster. You were the frightened child trapped inside it. Every cruel word, every manipulative act, every cold silence. Not expressions of evil, but of exile. Parts of you were exiled long ago. Your gentleness, your innocence, your grief, your wonder, they weren't safe. So they were locked away. In their place, you constructed a persona strong enough to survive. Sharp enough to avoid pain, loud enough to be heard, hardened enough to never be forgotten again. But somewhere along the way, you mistook the mask for the face, and you built your identity around your defenses. So here's the ultimate truth. You do not need to destroy the monster. You need to free the child. This is not sentimental, this is surgical. Because the child inside you remembers who you really are before the world got to you, before you learned that love was conditional, before you decided kindness was unsafe, before you equated worth with performance, before you thought being good meant being powerless. You were never supposed to erase that version of yourself. You were supposed to protect it. You were supposed to return to it. But you were too busy surviving. Now you have a choice. You can keep building cathedrals to the monster, reinforce the walls, polish the lies, expand the empire of your ego, or you can walk into the ruins, into the parts of you you've disowned, and kneel before the one you left behind, not to apologize, but to invite them home. And when you do, you'll remember something ancient, a secret buried beneath philosophy, psychology, and even religion. The real opposite of evil is not goodness, it's wholeness. And wholeness comes not from perfection, but from integration. The greatest danger is not in feeling anger, jealousy, pride, or even hate. It's in disowning those feelings, banishing them to the unconscious, where they grow teeth. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." You don't escape your darkness by transcending it. You heal by holding it, witnessing it, letting it breathe, letting it weep, because it is trying to tell you something vital, that every part of you is carrying a story, and no story deserves to be silenced. And so, you begin to listen deeply to the part of you that lashes out. It was never cruelty. It was a boundary crossed too many times. To the part of you that manipulates, it was never malice. It was a desperate plea to not be left behind. To the part of you that controls, it was never dominance. It was fear wearing steel. You look at all of it, and finally, you stop judging. You say, "I see you. I know why you came." And that is the moment you become truly dangerous to the systems that taught you to fragment yourself. Because now you cannot be broken by shame. You cannot be hijacked by guilt. You cannot be recruited into performance. You are whole. And with that wholeness comes something more powerful than all the control in the world. Peace. Not the peace of avoidance. Not the peace of suppression. The peace of alignment. Of walking through the world knowing exactly who you are and not needing the world to agree. Of loving without losing yourself. Of saying no without flinching. Of grieving without fearing collapse. You are not here to be good. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be real. And realness contains both shadow and light. To be human is to carry contradictions, to want to help and harm, to build and destroy, to love and fear intimacy, to crave freedom and run from responsibility. The monster was only ever dangerous because you refused to see yourself clearly. But now you do. And something extraordinary happens when you live from that place. Others feel it. Your presence becomes an invitation, not to imitate you, but to remember themselves. Your integrity disrupts. Your calmness exposes pretense. Your authenticity triggers the performance in others, not out of malice, but as a mirror. And in that reflection, some will hate you, but others will wake up. Because rebellion is contagious. And when you reclaim your soul from the monster's grip, you become a silent revolution. Every smile without agenda, every boundary without cruelty, every act of love without performance, all of it says, there is another way. And that way is not new, it's ancient. It's the path of return to yourself, to the child, to the voice beneath the noise, to the part of you that always knew. You were never meant to become a monster to survive. You were meant to become whole to truly live. And maybe, just maybe, the monster was never your enemy. Maybe it was the guardian at the gate, the final illusion, the necessary teacher, the last mask you had to wear before finally remembering your own face.